now, please welcome Vice President of Engineering and AI Strategy for Amex GBT, Marilyn Markham, and Data Science Leader for KLM, Matthijs Kieskamp, in conversation with Skift Head of Research, Seth Borko.
Everybody, hello, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your networking session. I am very excited about this session to get back into it. I feel like we're on the cutting edge of people who are really executing and implementing AI. We've got Matthijs from KLM, and we've got Marilyn from Amex GBT. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So we've got actually so much to talk about. I want to kind of cover a lot of the topics that we've heard earlier today, and I want to kind of go through the workflow of what it actually takes to build and implement an AI-powered app, like in the real world, in a real business. And so one of the first topics is data. This is not just an AI summit, it's a data and AI summit. Garbage in, garbage out, all that stuff. One of the big challenges is data, siloed data. Matthijs, I know you've worked really hard at KLM about breaking down data silos. How important is that to this? Tell us about that.
Well, without the data platforms, we wouldn't have any AI or any smartness in that sense. So I'm mostly focused on the operational side of things. And especially within operations, if you want to take a glimpse at more integral decisions, it's about bringing together data. So if you want to make a decision on a crew cancellation or a flight cancellation, you can look at it in the crew specific domain, but you need to take into account all the other things as well. So this is where we've built different data lakes, data real-time applications, just to get in data and then make that sort of integral, holistic picture of operations to be able to decide on it.
And this was a pretty simple process. You did it in 6 months?
Nah, I think for the operational data lake, we started in 2018, 17-ish, and we're now at a stage where we think, well, this is actually quite okay. But we're still not complete. But yeah, it's been an ongoing thing for the past 6-7 years.
So half a decade or more to get your data in the right place you need it to be to really start implementing AI at scale.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a big challenge. People are either ahead or behind or something like that. Marilyn,
yep.
What about same thoughts to you? Talk to me about data integrity, data quality at Amex GBT and how you think about that running your tech teams.
So when it comes to Gen AI, the cool thing is that it unlocks your unstructured data, but historically, that's also the data that doesn't exist in a database. It exists in the team's SharePoint, some shared drives, in obscure corners of the enterprise universe. And we've been really scratching our heads about how we get access to that data because there is no data hygiene most of the time in these SharePoints. The teams put stuff in there, and when it's old, well, they just add new stuff, but it's no one's job to go clean it up. So we've found some interesting startups that offer for you to have to rebuild new databases with this unstructured data, but actually use like a web crawler internally and go find all that data, bring it together, and then use AI to summarize it. And I thought that was a really nice twist on data cleansing and data aggregation and breaking down silos. That is new school, I guess, because you don't actually have to move and shift. You can just go find it where it's at and then summarize what you need.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point about there's getting all the data you need, and then there's getting the right data, and it's kind of like some large internet search company might have trained their data model on Reddit threads and garbage in, garbage out sometimes. So it's interesting that you're working very proactively to avoid that problem. Matthijs, are you seeing similar problems with your data sets, or do you feel like your data is pretty clean?
It depends a bit on the use case.
Yeah.
We've seen similar issues. For example, if you have a flight afterwards, the crew need to write a flight report, and those are really free text.
Yeah.
So this is a classic example. There's a lot of data and a lot of valuable information in there, but it's free text. So up until now, has been useless. But now you can actually summarize it and then actually make sense of it. Yeah.
So in the same kind of area, we have business travel rules that are given to us, but we told people to give reports and to document their expectations, but we never gave them a template that said it needs to include all of this data. So beyond just maybe old or trash data, there's also absence of data because we didn't know we actually always needed for this report to tell them about these specific items. So it's not there. You have whatever free flow report was top of mind for the person writing it, and now you're structuring it because you're getting AI to pull it out and make it usable. And some data is just not there because we never asked for it.
And are you able to fill those gaps, or do you need to go back and repopulate those fields?
We're trying to see two different approaches. One is you can go back and say, we actually need this, can someone fill it in? And usually there is someone who's like the team leader that can go find it. But sometimes we're also thinking, could we use AI and actually have a bot to chat with, and we give it a mission. Your mission is to make sure we collect these 12 pieces of information and then give it and say, go have a conversation with different people, maybe the travel manager, and get that information out of them and store it somewhere. So it's that.
It's a little bit of both. This is one of those interesting, so these are a lot of large language models, right? It's a very specific type of AI. So I think it's interesting, you're using the large language models to almost clean and sanitize your data and then feed it into other types of AI models. Do I have that right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Are you doing the same thing, Matthijs?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. We'll get there, though. I want to ask you this. How do you decide? So AI is not free. It's not a cheap technology. There's also a lot of different technologies, right? There's machine learning. There's generative AIs. There's these things called Excel spreadsheets that people use sometimes to process their data. So how do you think about what's a business problem that needs AI and what's a business problem that doesn't, and what type of AI do you need? I mean, maybe Marilyn, we'll start with you and we'll go to you as well, Matthijs.
At Amex we decided that to lead AI, we were actually going to start with business. So we actually start with what are the areas of the business that need an acceleration, that need a transformation, or that just need an uplift. And we start with what do we need? And I think this is not new. This is how you did business before AI. So keep doing that. Lead with the business. And we found 4 areas of the business that we thought they lend themselves really well to modernization. And I know that I lead AI and I should be advocating for everyone to use AI for everything, but it feels like running around with that proverbial hammer looking for nails.
Yeah.
So actually I say, what is the business problem? And we have a team, a multidisciplinary tech team that comes and looks at your problem and finds ways to resolve it. And we try and find all the ways except Gen AI, except if Gen AI is the accelerator because it's unstructured and you need structured, or vice versa, or some level of transformation. But we really try and use all the disciplines we've known about because they're usually well proven, they're cost efficient, and we have experts in the company. So we're not trying to develop new talent, new vendors, not any of that. So I think it's a good thing to start with an open mind of we could use any technology or maybe just people and processes to solve this one issue.
And Matthijs, I'm sorry, as we're thinking about when and where to use AI in the business context, Vivek was up here earlier talking about where AI should sit in the organization. He talked about standalone teams versus integrated teams. I know you're integrated with some of your stakeholders in this very specific function. How do you think about where you sit in the organization and how that makes your AI use effective or more effective?
Yeah, sometimes I try to describe myself as a business partner for AI, because especially what Marilyn said, they ask for a hammer. They say, "Give me a hammer," and it's like, "Okay, where's your nail?" And sort of, I see it also as my responsibility to also be the conscience of the business to make sure that sort of you're right sizing your solution. Because typically you can get 80% of the value with 20% of the work, and most of the time that's not with Gen AI or even machine learning, but even an Excel spreadsheet can be the first step. Yeah. And then we say, okay, actually we've gained that 80% value with the spreadsheet. We want to gain the additional 10% will go to machine learning, and then we want to go for the full 100%, then we might go to Gen AI. But it depends a bit on the use case as well.
I think that's great that it's not a one size fits all approach. So, all right, so that sets the groundwork. We've got the data, we've got the business partners, we've got the buy-in, we've got the right hammer and the right nail. So I want to talk about some of those nails specifically, and this is really cool because we've got some great case studies. I'm going to start with you, Marilyn. I want to talk about some examples of where you've used AI before. So we were talking about FAIR codes, which are pretty simple, easy to read things, right? Yeah. So tell me about that.
So FAIR rules, most agents, and you can start rolling the slide because it's going to take a minute. what you're seeing here is a global distribution system display of a fair rule. I chose KLM because he's next to me, and I took Amsterdam, New York because that's what he flew. And I said, if you were to speak to an agent and ask them, can I cancel this later if my trip doesn't happen? Or what are the limitations of this fare? They will be doing this. They are actually doing move down, move down, move down. There are 19 pages of this. And it's not a KLM thing. This is every airline out there has fare rules attached to their fares, and they are super long, unstructured. There's no standard to them. They're usually in English. So if you're a non-English speaking agent, if you're on the phone in a high pressure situation, it's crazy to expect you to read this and then come up with a synopsis of what the answer is. But if you take this as it is, just take the display, do nothing to it, give it to an LLM, and say, summarize it for me, it does it really well. The prompt doesn't even need to be complicated. You just say, summarize it for me, make it into functional categories. How much vaguer could I have been? And you say, okay, go, do it. This is what you get. And it contains every, I would say, significant item that is on that very long display. And from there, if you keep the context of the conversation, you can actually have a conversation and say, tell me, if you go to the next slide, tell me, can I cancel this ticket? And it will tell you exactly and give you the reference of where it found it. And this is not using any kind of bleeding edge, training of the AI model, nothing. It's literally take the text, dump it, say, I'm going to ask you questions about this, and then go for it. And so this is a really cool application. Yeah. I didn't even put it in context of the agent's desktop. Mm-hmm. But for us, the agents should never have to write the prompt. Yeah. They should never have to do move down, move down, move down. But the fact is, the actual UI that they use, the application, knows how to do those two things. So if you give them a button that just says, see summarized fair rule, you can give them the summary immediately. And if you want to put a chat in there and allow them to ask questions, you can do that. And they never need to interact with an LLM. And it's always optimized.
How do you know it's accurate?
Because we're actually using senior agents to do some testing across various airlines around the world, make sure that it looks right. And each time they see a discrepancy, we send that to our prompt engineers to see whether there's anything they can tweak in the prompt to make sure that the LLM is grounded properly and is understanding things well. So it's a lot of testing, actually, and then prompt engineering.
We didn't really prep this question, but when you are doing that testing, do you find it's often an issue of prompt engineering, or is it a true hallucination within the model?
So we have seen hallucinations in the models, especially for, I would say, the most popular airports, like JFK, Atlanta, Charles de Gaulle. They seem to pop up randomly when there's insufficient information. So we've actually fixed that with prompt engineering, saying, if you think it's this because it's not there, it's not that. And it's part of the prompt every time, and it helps it to actually be truthful and be accurate. And so that's where it's like, yes, sometimes you're fighting against the pre-training, and other times it's legitimately confusing, and having a bit more text to disambiguate helps the model to perform well.
And you think it's the larger airports because there's more information on those airports out there in the open web and in the training data
Correct.
sets?
So it's like, I'm not sure where you're flying from. I'm going to suppose it's one of these because statistically
it's
probably
more likely
right.
to be. Got it. Interesting. And I want you to jump in on this as well, Matthijs. What you were saying about the UX was really interesting, about how you don't want it to be, well, you could be a chat interface, but you don't want it to be an extra pop-up. You're not trying to create a new page. You're trying to integrate it into your Amex GBT's agents, just regular workflow. I mean, why is that so important to you? Because
agents usually have about 20 applications open. And if you go to 21, that's one more thing to train, and it's hidden behind everything, and they forget it's there, and they don't use it. But having it in the single pane of glass gives it accessibility, discoverability, and you don't really need to train for something that's in your face and convenient.
And you were telling me, Matthijs, you have a rule at KLM. What is it?
Yeah, so every time you develop a new system or entity, you need to take one down as well. So the 20 doesn't become the 21 because I think we have 25-ish. But the 20 doesn't become the 21, but it actually stays 20, or ideal, it becomes 19 or 18 or 17.
I'm thinking back to my corporate days pre-Skift, and where they're, oh, congratulations, we launched a new system. I'm like, oh no, another login, and it's going to be a different single sign. I'm going to forget this password, reset everything. I'm glad to hear you say that. Let's go to an example from Air France KLM of where you've used AI. I know you've got a couple of interesting ones. I think one of them was like cancellations, and actually United CIO was on stage earlier talking about cancellations. So maybe tell us a little about this model that you've built and what it does for KLM.
Yeah, so what we have is, our hub Amsterdam is located in it used to be a lake, that lake. So there's a lot of fog every now and then, especially in autumn. Mm-hmm. We tend to know that a day in advance. We roughly know sort of what the expected capacity is going to be. But we know the day in advance. So then the question is, what do we do to act upon it? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't do anything, flights will move down and push back, and then you have no control over which flight is on time, which isn't, and then you get this whole snowballing effect through your entire operation, mm-hmm. and you have to cancel like tremendous amount of flights. So what we actually built, we have an AI system that preemptively cancels some key strategic flights, such in a way that we can protect the more important ones, and we cancel the less impactful ones. Because of course you have the whole operational context where you have your flights, your crew, your passengers, each with their own route according to the network, and then if you delay one flight, crew on it will transfer to the next one, that flight gets delayed, the aircraft for that one was scheduled to go maintenance, doesn't work out anymore, so you have this whole snowball, and by sort of pre-selecting the flights we want to take out, we have much more control over which flight actually get cancelled. The positive side of that for the passenger as well is because we do it the day ahead, they might actually get an overnight rebooking. So before they actually go to the airport, and we'll inform them, hey, your flight has been cancelled and we got an alternative for you. Mm-hmm. And also if they have a transfer, so rather than being very anxious on your inbound flight, am I going to make my outbound flight? You just know sort of what's in there, they got it under control. Also, because the day is disrupted, so any operational staff that is on duty can focus on the actual issues at hand, rather than cleaning up the big giant mess that's really uncontrollable.
Yeah. Does that feed back into any of your other systems? Like, would you be able to offer free loyalty points to a customer that gets canceled, or does it go back to the consumer at all?
For now, that doesn't. But what sort of the main thing here is behind this engine, in order to really cherry pick those flights that you do want to cancel, mm-hmm. You come back to the earlier point, you need all the operational context. Yeah. Because you need to know, okay, is there any crew on there that needs a training? Is there any crew that has a connection? Crew mislocations, passenger connections, aircraft going in maintenance, all these kind of things. It's one giant web connected, and you need to get that whole full overview of data in there in order to make informed decisions.
Do you have insights into why one flight gets canceled or another? I know with some of these machine learning and more complicated models, it's hard to audit them. Are you kind of telling it, prioritize this, or is it just being like, this is the one we chose, and you don't really have any insights into why one got chosen or the other?
Yeah. So this model is actually a combination of different techniques, and the actual selection of flights is actually an old school operations model or operations research model. So it's actually an optimization problem. And the cool thing about optimization models is that you can really trace certain decisions and really see it chose this one over that one because of X, Y, Z. And that really helps also in understanding our own model and also explaining it to the business. Because it is like these kind of decisions, you're saying, hey, cancel 2 million worth of flights for tomorrow. That's really impactful, so you want to make sure that you're selecting the right ones.
Does it ever happen that you cancel a flight because of fog and then it's bright and sunny and clear the next day?
Yes.
Yes?
No, but this is where sort of the human also comes in, because this system really does very well in selecting the right flights. So really the number crunching, but it's the human who ultimately decides, hey, I'm going to run the model because I expect some bad weather. And it's also the human deciding, okay, I'm going to implement the solution because, well, I expect the impact to be there. So the human might say, hey, there's actually a fair chance that there's no fog coming in. And so I'm going to take my chances and not run it or not implement it. So that is up to the human. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm going to jump back to you, Marilyn. I'm just enjoying this. We're going through some of these real, practical, real-life use cases of where AI is. I want to remind everyone in the audience that we will be taking Q&A. So as you're hearing these amazing case studies, if you want to know more, please remember to submit the question in the app. So Marilyn, I want another case study that I know you've been working on at Amex GBT has been kind of email assistance. This is again back in this LLM generative AI space. So what are you doing to help your agents be more productive?
Yep. So the generative AI model is reading the email, the first email that comes in for every conversation. It determines the intent of that email. We were requested from operations to be very detailed. So it's not just this a cancellation. I want to cancel what? A hotel, a flight, whatever. That information is not in the email. People just write, hey, I'm not going on that trip, cancel it. So we found that using AI and thinking that all the information is in the intake is a wrong assumption. We actually needed business systems to inform and provide the context of the conversation we're having with our customers, which is like pre-understanding that we have between our agents and our customers. So we did the baseline with LLM, which is extract everything you can out of that email. Then we pivoted to classic engineering of accessing identification system, trip information, operational information, to then create the full picture of what is this about. One of the automations we have is when it's a new booking, pull out all the pieces that you need to submit to the tyranny of the search box to go ahead and actually do a structured request in existing systems.
Yeah.
Because we own our own online booking tool, so there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to automate searching. That's what we do every day. So that's what we did. But then what you said, having a human take action on it is still super important. When the offer comes back, it is not automatically sent to the traveler, it is presented to the agent. And that is a game changer because as an agent, you want to be a counselor. We call them travel counselors. But actually, today they do a lot of transaction. Yeah. If you give them an offer and a request and they get to scrutinize it and groom it and actually just tailor it, they go back into the role of a counselor to see, is this connection going to work? Would I wake up at 5 a.m. for this flight? And do all of that extra work that is counsel, and then be able to say, I approve this offer and send it through. So we're finding that for the TCs, they're super happy that they get to do the job they actually signed up for, which is counseling and not just transacting. And for our customers, the turnaround time is much faster because manually doing it can take up to 40 minutes across all the systems.
So if I'm understanding that the customer will email, hey, I want to help me book this flight, the travel counselor, travel therapist perhaps, right?
Sometimes.
would get it and say, this is what we think the customer wants. Is this email okay to send? And then they can modify and approve it. So this is an example of, I guess, like upskilling maybe, where you're taking people and you're trying to help improve them on the operational. And do these travel counselors or therapists or advisors, do they need to be worried about losing their jobs to AI?
So they initially thought we were trying to replace them.
Yeah.
And we've had to explain that the complexity of the job of travel cannot really be properly replaced with AI. We actually want to humanize their job rather than replace the humans in the job. And so once we showed them what we were doing, they actually saw the value that it made their life easier. When it came to disruption scenarios, we're like, we're not replacing you. The situation is super fluid. A pre-trained model is not going to know what flights are available during the tornado, right? That's something that happens on the fly. Our airline partners send us information on the fly. And so you need a seasoned agent who's got that expertise to, one, calm the traveler, empathize with the traveler, and then go and get creative finding solutions. I think we're far away from that in today's AI maturity.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad I still have a job. I touched the mic. Sorry about that. AI could have replaced me for that one. Matthijs, you have one more example, and I want to talk a bit about hand luggage prediction. That's an important one for you. Talk to me about what you guys have been doing there.
What haven't we been doing? I think that's the big question. So hand luggage, as you might know, is a big problem because people prefer to take the carry-on rather than checked-in luggage. So everyone takes in as much as they can, but the plane doesn't hold everything at the same time. So there's a balance in sort of what we can bring. And of course, you don't want to find out that you have too many hand luggage the moment you want to depart, and people just are cramping it in and it doesn't fit, and you need to take stuff downstairs. So you want to be proactive on it. So you want to make sure that when people show up at the airport, they're incentivized to maybe hand in the luggage to go in the belly, or maybe at the gate to proactively take a few items. But you don't want to overdo it, because people have a reason to bring on carry-on, so they don't want to check it in. So you want to take in luggage, but not too much. But no, you want to take in too little.
Just the right balance.
Exactly, and this is a very hard problem. Not in the least. We need to, if we want to predict sort of the amount of hand luggage that gets on a plane. First of all, we need a predictor value. So in the classical machine learning, you need to generate a number. You need a training data set. So how do you get training data of how much hand luggage is being taken if people don't report how much hand luggage they bring? So we've actually tried various approaches there. So we actually had people manually sitting at the gate just checkboxing how many people bring. This is a big bag, small bag, medium bag.
I kind of love that for all the glamour of AI, it does at the end of the day boil down to like someone sitting there at the gate being like, all right, one large, one medium, and really feed in what goes into the model.
Yeah, but then in that solution, actually, we saw that what might be a big bag for you might be a medium bag for me. So between the different sort of people doing the checking, we actually saw data differences, and so that data wasn't really reliable. So we also tried cameras. So on the gates, we scan when you go through the boarding.
All about the data, though, right? Like that's the point. It's
exactly.
about data in.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, please.
It's funny because, yes, people say it's very unglamorous that humans are having to do this. But when you use a large language model to do things like intent management, and it's complex intent, we actually had to manually qualify over 5,000 emails by hand so that we could see whether the model was accurate or not accurate. And that's something people ask a lot, is how do you know that your LLM is accurate?
Yeah.
Well, you actually have to create a baseline. Who creates the baseline? People.
Humans. Yeah.
So it's not super glamorous, the development of these solutions. But when it works and you've calibrated it well, then it's just monitoring and it's very cool.
Well, we're talking about some of the challenges. I mean, I think ChatGPT is down right now. What do you do? How do you worry about uptime and reliability in a true enterprise infrastructure, environment? I think this is a question for both of you as you start to use OpenAI and these new kind of systems.
I think in that sense, the OpenAI or ChatGPT, it's just as any other third-party vendor system that we use. So we have service level agreements with them. And of course, it's a matter of like checks and balances. Like, what do you do when the thing is down? Do you have a twinned operation? That might be hard in a third-party vendor. Do you maybe have like indeed twinned maybe with ChatGPT and Gemini, different backend systems, just fallback system, and that really boils down sort of what's the risk of what happens if it goes down. And right now, most of our systems that we have, it's mostly on the it's on top of addition to Marilyn's point. Like we give the operator, like rather than having to do the manual searching, we give them a suggestion with the cancellation bit. But there's a fallback procedure in place in case it goes wrong. Yeah.
And Marilyn, what about you?
Matthijs, the same thing as Matthijs.
So it's about having a fallback, treat them like any other provider.
Correct. The only thing that I would note is that some of the language model providers are young companies.
Yeah.
And they do not necessarily have, the legal team to review the paperwork that we, big company, require of them to sign. And sometimes they don't have these fallbacks. And so we're having to do what Matthijs said, which is have multiple of them lined up and us implement the fallback on our side rather than having the provider, the SaaS solution, provide us with fallback and guarantees. So that's a bit tricky, and I think it's just a maturity issue.
Yeah, well, this is a young industry, but growing very rapidly. Marilyn, Matthijs, thank you so much for joining, for telling us about how you're implementing AI in your organizations. I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you.